Hi, everyone. I'm Marco DiGeorge. I'm the co-founder and instructor at Truthful Acting Studios. We're an acting conservatory located in Orlando, Florida. And we come on every now and then, and we like to talk about different topics. And so it's good to be with you all today. Uh, if you're joining us live today, just so you know how this works, we do have a chat feature. There you can, if you have questions during this conversation or you like to be part of the conversation, please go ahead into the chat and you can put your questions or interact with us. Our administrator, Samantha, will be there to talk with you during this, and I will try to answer as many of your live questions as we can, as well as the things I have planned for today's session. So today's topic, just typically when I go through these sessions, I'm discussing directly or technical things as it relates to acting or sometimes the art of acting. But today I wanted to take a moment and to talk about something that impacts us as artists, but is also as human beings. And this is the concept of anxiety and stress, which are two different things, which we'll talk about here shortly. And in our acting classes or my filmmaking classes or whatever class I'm actually teaching, whether I'm teaching directing, whether I'm teaching acting, whether I'm teaching life lessons, it all kind of goes in the same direction in the sense of anxiety and stress is a big part of the conversation we have. When learning how to be an actor, it's important that we understand both of these things that affect us. Anxiety is a big part of our life as a human being, and so is stress. But they're not the same thing. Too many times we use these words interchangeably, and we use one when we mean the other. And we think, one may be bad or one may be, we think different things about them. So today's conversation is what is anxiety separately, and then what is stress, and what are the things that we can do to work through them as an actor. They are a big part of our lives, really, as any artist. As a human being, they both affect us. So I also love to have this broader conversation as well, whereas even though I'm going to talk in terms of acting or as being an artist, these also can apply directly to your life, even outside of those realms. So anxiety and stress. So the first thing is, as I said, they are different things. They're not the same thing. So I want to break each one of them down. So let's start with anxiety. So many times we feel that anxiety is the stress that we're feeling. We feel this weight or we feel this pressure and we think that's the anxiety. But actually, the anxiety is something much different. To break it down to its simplest form, anxiety is simply the feeling of fear. That's the definition of it. Anxiety is the feeling of fear. So anxiety is that feeling that you have when you have like a rush of adrenaline or you feel very cold or you start to shake a little bit. It's that feeling of wanting to run from something where you feel like you're in danger and you want to run. Now, the feeling of anxiety can be very overwhelming if we don't understand what it is or how to deal with it. So let's kind of talk about what this is. Okay, so it's the feeling of fear. Now, in some of my other sessions, I address this more directly. I have another session called The Duality of the Human Psyche. So I go into this much more in depth as far as how the logical mind functions and produces this fear. So I'm going to go over it as kind of an overview today, but if you want more in depth, please watch that session as well, The Duality of the Human Psyche. So there's two parts of our makeup. It's our logical mind, is part of our duality and our emotional core, right? And I'm pointing to different parts of us because the logical mind is what we call it's our head space. It's up here in our head. Our brain is here, and then our emotional core, we feel it. It comes more from our center. Well, those two pieces make up who we are, how we think, our conscious mind, all of the thoughts that you have in your head every single moment. Well, the logical mind's main function is survival. And its main tool for survival, to keep you safe, is fear. And that's all this is, right? It's actually very simple. If the logical mind feels that you are in any danger whatsoever, whether it's real danger or perceived danger, it will inject you with this thing called fear. And fear it's a heightened sense, it's a heightened sensory experience, is basically what that means. So when you feel fear, there's an adrenaline release in your body, and that adrenaline will allow you to have a higher sensory experience. And it heightens your senses, so then you can escape that fear. Escape from whatever you're afraid of. So that's really what is happening there. So because of this, like let's say you're in uh, you're in actual danger. Let's say there's something like, you always like to give the example, you're hiking through the woods and you encounter a bear. And so there's an actual danger with this bear. Well, you're going to be filled with fear, which will give you a heightened sensory experience, meaning all of your senses for a moment are at a heightened level, touch, smell, taste, sight, all of that. And what that will allow you to do is then escape the danger. And also, the fear will suppress emotion. That's part of it. That's the mind's trying to suppress your emotional perception, give you all of your senses at a heightened level for a short period of time so you can run away or get to safety. And then once you're safe, it subsides. And then you can process the feelings of all of these things. So, this is really what anxiety is. Anxiety is just the feeling or processing of fear. We tend to look at anxiety as a negative thing. When we use the word, we use it in a negative context of saying, "Oh, the anxiety is too much for me. The anxiety is overwhelming to me." And yes, we do have those situations, which I'll talk about and address later. But really, anxiety itself is not harmful to us. The anxiety itself is short term. It is the feeling of fear. And when we realize what it is, then we have the ability to work through it. In fact, anxiety itself is a feeling that we actually like as human beings when we have a good perception about it. Okay, so let's look at it like this. If you are a fan of watching horror movies, scary movies, psychological thrillers, those type of things, then that is because the enjoyment out of that is being scared. We enjoy being scared, the feeling of anxiety, when it is in a safe environment, when we know that we are in not actual physical danger. But there's a whole genre and an industry built around being scared. There's haunted houses and attractions at the big theme parks, like Universal Studios has something called Halloween Horror Nights, right? Some of the other theme parks have Halloween themed type of things, and they're all meant where you go to this experience to be scared. We enjoy that feeling. So anxiety itself is not a bad thing. In fact, we tend to even do things in life that will increase that feeling of anxiety. We do extreme sports, or even slightly extreme sports, meaning things that are difficult. Skateboarding gives you a level of anxiety. Roller skating gives you a level of anxiety. And then of course that increases to mountain climbing gives you a high level of anxiety. Skydiving, bungee jumping, those type of things, roller coaster rides, all of those things actually increase our anxiety, but in a safe way. So we enjoy the feeling because it's a heightened sensory experience. It's a heightened sensory experience. Our senses are heightened for a brief period of time. And while that happens, we feel more alive during those moments. So that's what anxiety is. When we remove the threat, the anxiety goes away. So if we're anxious about going on a new roller coaster that we've never ridden before, Well, we might have a lot of anxiety before we go on it. Once we go on it and have the experience, we no longer have the anxiety afterwards because the threat is no longer there. We've had the experience, we're on the other side of it. So anxiety itself, and this is just a very important concept that we can take in. Anxiety itself is not dangerous to us, and in fact, we enjoy the feeling. Now, we can become overwhelmed with anxiety, and I'll talk about how that occurs, uh, because people who have some issues with anxiety, meaning it's uncontrollable, and they have anxiety very often, and we don't know why. Sometimes we have anxiety and we don't know why we have that anxiety. Well, when that happens, that's when we might need to talk through it with somebody and try to figure out, okay, what is happening. And again, I'll address that after I talk about stress because they actually go hand in hand. Anxiety and stress do affect each other, but they're vastly different. Okay, so once again, anxiety, the feeling of fear, whenever we're faced with something that the logical mind tells us is a danger, whether it's real or perceived, we will feel that fear. Okay. Now, I'll also address later that this is very important for us, actually, as an actor and as an artist. It's very important for us, and we're going to learn how to use that. But first, let's switch and now let's talk about stress. Okay, so if the anxiety is the feeling of fear, anxiety also, one more thing, it exists in the moment. So just like the duality of the human psyche, the logical mind only exists when it's thinking about the past or it's trying to project the future. That's where the logical mind exists. It's like a computer. It's processing what has happened and what could happen next. But then our emotional core is the experience we have, it's a feeling experience we have of what's happening now. So the anxiety we have is the logical mind is projecting something bad might happen, and so it's injecting into us the fear of what's going on now. But it's short term. We remove the threat, the anxiety goes away. Stress is long term. So, in trying to figure out, okay, what is stress? When do we feel stressed? Well, stress is a lot of times when I talk to students and they say, I tell them to say, well, what is stress to you? And it's like a weight on me. It's like a tension in my body. It's like like it's like everything is like constricting in. It's like I don't even want to like move or get out of bed or do these things. I'm like, okay, good. So yes, that's the feeling of stress. It's very uncomfortable tension in our body. So, why do we feel stressed? Well, we feel stressed because of a feeling of obligation of having to do something you don't want to do in that moment. That's what causes stress. That's it. That's it. Yes, I'm oversimplifying the physiology of this, but that's really where it comes from. Stress is the feeling of obligation of having to do something you don't want to do. So if there's something you really, let's say you wake up in the morning and there's something you have to do today and you really don't want to do that today, but you have to force yourself to do it anyway, there's going to be a feeling of stress with that. If you're on some sort of time deadline and you feel like, oh, I can't get this done in the amount of time that I have, maybe you even enjoy doing whatever it is you're doing, but you feel this feeling of obligation of having to do it within a condensed amount of time, you will feel stressed. So, stress is something that we want to learn how to reduce in our lives. We can't completely eliminate it because everywhere we turn, life is stressful. But there are bigger issues in our life, bigger moments where we can reduce it. And this is very important that we do. So, when we start to think about, well, what are things that we feel obligated to do? Well, let's take the big one, work, the job that you might have. Now, work is a very important part of our daily lives, especially, here in the US, in this culture, work is an instrumental part of our lives, right? In this type of society, we grow up, we get an education, we as best we can, we then try to apply that education or what we've learned to something where we can then have a return for money. We need money in our society. We need money to then live. So that kind of tells us there's this obligation already, a sociological obligation, a cultural obligation of things that we have to do. So then we go out, we get a job. Well, some jobs we like, and those are great. If you like what you're doing, that's great. You're going to have less stress. But let's say, and most people can typically relate to this, either yourself or from somebody you know. And what I'll usually do when I'm in a class, I'll say, do you know anyone in your life that has ever been in a job that they've hated? Meaning that has been toxic to them. And I've had this, experience in my life directly. I've done work, I've done jobs that I did not want to do. And it was either because of the people I was working with that were toxic to me, maybe the job itself, uh, whatever it was. Maybe the direction of the industry. I mean, whatever it was. But when something is toxic to you, meaning that it's really weighing you down, it's beating you up, you feel deflated even just because you have to do it. That's draining on your energy. So then I would ask someone, that might be in a toxic job. When I have students that come to me, it's like, oh my God, my job is so horrible and I hate it. And it just drains me. And I'm like, okay, so there's a solution. You could quit. Seems pretty easy. You could quit. And then, of course, what do they tell me? They tell me I can't quit. Well, why? Because I need the money, because I have bills I have to pay. Right? It typically comes down to money, especially in this culture. It's like, well, the concept is we have to pay bills. We have a car payment, a house payment, like living expenses. We have things that we have to do. So I need to have this job. I'm like, well, I understand you need to have a job because yes, in our society, that's how it works. But why do you need this job? You could quit and maybe do something else. And so they say, well, no, I can't because I'm already established here. I'm like, okay, but you can be established somewhere else. It's like you can move, you can change that, and they keep putting up roadblocks of why they can't. I'm not qualified for anything else. I can't possibly, I learn something else. And I'm either too old or too young or too, it's roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. But I look at it and I say, yes, but where you're at now is slowly killing you. It's toxic to you. So even though you realize it or not, it's slowly eating you away. Okay, so now let's look at this. We're in a job that is toxic to us, but we stay there. We stay there because the feeling of obligation of having to stay there because we want to pay our bills. We don't want to stay there. We want to quit. We want to do something else. But because we feel obligated to do it, we feel obligated to keep this job, to make this money, to pay those bills. That's stress. And this is the job example is probably one of the most accessible to us as far as understanding it, but that's it. And when I finally, when I talk through, especially with students and other people, and uh, if they make the decision ever to quit their job, they describe it as a weight was immediately lifted off of me. Yes, because you took control of your own life. In that moment, in that decision, you took control of your own life. So let's take a look at that. So, if stress is created by the feeling of obligation of having to do something you don't want to do, then why is it we feel this way? Where does that weight come from? So, in any moment, you have a choice. You have a choice of what to do or what not to do. And like with the job example, and typically comes from a feeling. You have a feeling that you want to quit, or you want to maybe do something else, or you just need to get away from this toxic environment. It comes from a feeling that's inside of you, your emotional core. But then your logical brain comes in, right? The logical mind comes in because our feelings get filtered through our mind, and it tells us you can't. So your feeling in this moment says, I want to do this. I have a desire to do this. The logical mind says, no. Because of this obligation, you have to continue doing what you're doing. So in that, think about this. You want to do something. Think about like the child inside of you that wants to do something and the parent inside of you telling you no. There's an ill feeling with that. And immediately we feel like the parent-child relationship again. And we're also telling ourselves, meaning the logical brain is telling your emotional core that no, you're wrong. You're wrong for having these feelings. You should not have these feelings. And instead, you need to get over those feelings and do what you need to do. Think of what's happening. You're doing this inside of yourself. We don't even realize we have this conversation with ourselves, but you're scolding yourself for even having that feeling to begin with. And you're telling yourself, no, this is not good enough for right now. And so it cultivates the belief that we are not good enough. And so this psychological thing that happens to us, we start believing that we should not be feeling the things that we're feeling. And that's not the case. Your feelings are extremely valid. And if you're having those feelings, there's a reason you're having those feelings, and we need to explore that. So because of that, the parent-to-child relationship, and because we feel that, oh, we're not good enough, and I'm not good enough because I had these feelings, and I shouldn't be having these feelings, and I'm wrong or I'm bad for having these feelings, we beat ourselves up because of that. Now, the other side of it is then this part of ourselves really wants to still do it, but understands that we didn't do it. We didn't make the choice to quit. We didn't make the choice to do something else because we were afraid, because the logical mind is fear. And so we had two choices we could do today. We could go in and give our resignation and quit this job, or we could keep going down the path and working, even though we desperately do not like it. So when the desire's there and we want to go in, quit this job and do something else, and then because of fear, we choose not to. Now we also feel like a coward because we made the choice based in fear, not based in desire. So now we're also beating ourselves up because we feel not good enough, because we feel like a coward. This is a complete unconscious process. So it's important to start understanding this, bring it to the conscious level of like, yeah, that's what's happening. You are physically beating yourself up from the inside. It's a physiological attack on your body. It's tension. Our muscles become tense. Our circulatory system becomes tense. Everything becomes tense because simply of now the feeling of not feeling good enough, of not feeling strong enough, of not feeling that we can actually brave enough or courageous enough to do what we actually want to do in life. That's what creates stress. And you have control over that, at least of the big things in life. Because you can make the choice to do what you want to do. It's hard. And some of these things I know when I talk about them, it tends to oversimplify it. It's very difficult sometimes to do this, but you have to empower yourself to begin with and say, yes, I do have a choice. So let's look at another example. Work is a pretty clear one, but let's also look at relationships because we do this. These are the two big areas in life we do this in. It's work and then relationships. And then, of course, we apply it to many other minor things. In a relationship, we do the same thing. We tend to, if you've ever known anyone that was in a bad relationship. Now, I'm not talking about a good relationship that's going through a tough time, because yes, you work through that. I'm talking about two people that maybe do not belong to each other because they are toxic to each other. And so when you're in a toxic relationship, it's important to remove the toxicity by removing the relationship. But we stay in relationships because of the feeling of obligation of having to do something you don't want to do, which is mean be with that person. Now, if it's romantic, typically we stay in that relationship because of the history of it and because we've put in time, or simply because of the fear that we don't want to be alone. And being in a toxic relationship is better than not being in a relationship. This also applies to friendships and to family relationships as well. Because sometimes we are in a family relationship far longer than we need to. As a child with toxic parents, for example, we feel obligated because, well, they're my parents. I have to be in this relationship with them. Siblings will feel like, oh, well, this is my brother or sister, so I have to be there for them no matter what. That's the feeling of obligation. You see what I mean? It's not necessarily what your desire is, but this feeling of obligation of what we've been taught culturally, sociologically, that keeps us bound in there. Friendships. I've seen friendships over time where it's like, this is not a good friendship. One person is just very berating of the other. It's very toxic. It's like, so I would say, well, why do you hang around this person? They're toxic to you. Well, we've known each other for a very long time. They've been in my life forever. I can't disassociate. The feeling of obligation. These things create stress. So what I say as far as relationships are concerned is even with work or anything in your life, start to take note. Start to journal. Just keep a log and say, okay, like with a relationship. So it's like, okay, so I have a sibling, and let's say my sibling, every time I have lunch with them, every time I get together with them, I feel bad afterwards. It's like, okay, take note of that. I met with them, we talked about this. How do I feel? Bad. Okay. Next time I met with them, we talked about this, similar topics. They want to talk about politics, religion, things that we shouldn't be talking about. And I feel bad. It's like, okay, so you have a choice now. Either put limits on what you discuss, see if that works, or if it's just if it's oil and water and it doesn't get along, then choose not to be around as often. I'm not saying you have to have a big breakup in a friendship or even in a family thing where it's like you have to have the talk and say, no, I don't want to see you again. Don't let it get to that point because it will eventually get to that point. Don't let it get to the point, but instead, simply don't be available as much. You don't have to get together all the time if it's making you feel bad. You can still see them on occasion versus all the time. You have control over your life. Don't allow the feeling of obligation, even of society and of culture, to get in the way of what's happening with you. Don't allow anything else to bring you down and make you any less of what you can be. It's difficult. I understand that. So the first thing is start taking notes. So going back to, for example, of the work. Let's say you wake up today and you really feel like quitting. Write it down. Right now in the morning, I feel like quitting my job. But don't. Go to work, play it out, see how it goes. At night, come back and write down, it's at night, how do I feel? I feel like I want to quit my job. Okay, good. You bookended that. Like if one of them was different, if you wanted to go to work today and then something happened, okay. But you didn't want to go to work today, you came back and you wish you didn't go to work today. Well, that's telling you something. Then do it tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Do it for a couple weeks. Do it for a month. See what the data tells you, because your logical mind needs that sometimes. And then you have written down proof every single day. I didn't want to go, and every single day I wish I would be doing something else. Well, now that you have that data, do something about it. If this feeling keeps hovering around you, if there's a feeling that is not going away, then it's not going to change. Because we can have bad days at work, right? I mean, look, we can have, uh, it happens. We wake up one day and it's like, it's not uh it's I feel off today. I feel tired today. Um or maybe you have a spat with somebody at work. I mean, things happen like that. Don't let one little thing to guide this, but this is why we keep a log and say, but no, for 3 straight weeks I woke up with a desire not to go to work and to do something else. And in 3 straight weeks, I came home and it reinforced that desire. Okay, well, 3 weeks might as well be 3 months or 3 years. It's not going to change at that point. So now it's time for you to then make the change. You can control the stress. Okay, so when we beat ourselves up, actually attack on your body. It's attack on your muscular system, physiologically, like we attack ourselves and create tension. So this is now where we get into something else where stress can create anxiety and vice versa. This is what we have to watch out for. This is why stress is a very negative thing. Stress, because it puts so much strain on your body, it can have very damaging effects. And medically, it can have damaging effects. And even psychologically, it can have damaging effects long term. So you really want to get that under control. Psychologically, I would love for you to always feel good about yourself, about who you are. I want you to feel confident about the decisions you make. I want you to feel that your feelings are valid. These are very important things in life, and I would love for you all to actually experience that if you don't already. But stress is the thing that causes that. So now, how does stress and anxiety work together? So let's go back to the job example. I wake up today, and maybe I've been feeling this for a while. I've done my research, and it's been 3 weeks, and it's like, you know what? I have to get out of this job. The people around me just make me feel bad. I don't like the environment. I need to do something else. I want to do this. Today's the day. I'm going to quit. And so I make the decision. I've already done the 3 weeks of research, right? I'm making the decision. I go into work. Now, because I've made the decision, there's a fear in front of me. Because the logical mind is like, wait, you're going to quit your job? But what are you going to do next? Where are you going to get money? How's this all going to work? It's putting us into this unknown area. Well, the mind's job is to keep you safe. So anything that it doesn't have all planned out, it sees as a threat. Anything unknown is a threat to the mind. And anytime you're approaching an unknown area, it's going to make you feel fear. Saying, be careful. We don't know what's going to happen. You could die. Something really bad could happen. So the mind is like, wait, you're going to quit. So it fills you with anxiety. But you're like, no, I'm still going to do it. I know I'm anxious, but I'm still going to fight through this and do this. Well, now we get to work and we want to go have this conversation with our boss. Well, the anxiety increases because the mind knows that the threat is getting closer. So that feeling inside of you, this very overwhelming sensory experience inside of you is now heightening. And so because the anxiety can be quite overwhelming, all we want it to do is stop. And unconsciously, we know that all we need to do is remove the threat and it stops. So we get there, it's time to talk to our boss, but it's so like overwhelming and we're shaking and we just don't know what to do, so we don't. We say, you know what? Tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. And the anxiety goes away. We immediately feel better by making that choice, by staying inside our box. So the stress led us to make a decision, but the decision was causing anxiety. But now we made an anxious choice, a fearful choice that has now added more stress of the feeling of obligation of continuing to do something we don't want to do. So we just added more stress. We feel bad about not making the choice when we wanted to. So we go home, we feel bad about it, but tomorrow is going to be the day. We wake up the next day, we go in, and now the anxiety is there again. And we choose once again to avoid the anxiety. Every time we avoid something because of anxiety, we make it stronger. There's a quote that I love. It's every time we choose safety, we reinforce fear. So it makes the fear more valid because we ran away from it last time, and then a second time, and then a third time, and a fourth time. So the anxiety has created more stress. The stress has created more anxiety, and around and around and around. And it's something we call a stress anxiety loop. And the thing about a stress anxiety loop is that it leads to depression. Because every time we go around that circle, we have anxiety that creates stress, stress that creates anxiety, anxiety that creates stress, and round and round and around. Every time that happens, it takes more energy from us to deal with the stress. Stress takes a lot of energy, a lot of energy. And so now we're using all of this energy to attack our systems, right? We feel all of that tension in our body. That's energy. And if we use enough energy, if that ends up happening, where we're using so much energy in order to create and deal with the stress, well, then uh, it lowers our energy state. So let's say that if we try to equate it, let's put it in simplistic terms, and we have 100 units of energy for a day, and then all of a sudden we're using 80 units of that 100 to deal with our stress that we're containing. We only have 20 units of energy to use for the day. So we go into something called a low energy state, or a depressed energy state, or a depression. It's the feeling of you wake up in the morning and you don't even want to get out of bed. You don't even want to face the day. You don't want to do anything. It's because of the stress, not the anxiety. It's because of the stress that has created the anxiety. So this is where the anxiety is still not the bad thing here. It's not the villain. The stress is. But you're in control of it. However, when you get into a stress anxiety loop, it's extremely difficult to deal with it on your own. The thing you need to do is talk to somebody. If you find yourself in a stress anxiety loop where it's very overwhelming, talk to somebody, anybody. If you can talk to a counselor, great. Like a counselor, a therapist, a psychologist, that would be wonderful if you have the ability to do that. I believe that almost every human being should have a therapist. I think we need to have somebody that we can openly talk to about the things that we're going through. I think it's very healthy for us to do. I think it's a necessity for actors to have a therapist to talk to. So if you can, now, if you can't, because maybe you can't afford it or you don't have one readily available to you, I understand. Talk to a friend, talk to a family member, talk to somebody that will be open to listening, but share it. Don't keep it inside. Share what you're going through. Allow somebody else to help you through what you're going. That's completely okay to do. There's nothing shameful, embarrassing, anything about that. We all as human beings need help from someone else from time to time. So allow yourself to do that. That's number one. Secondly, if you're anyone that deals with a level of anxiety that you have either taken medication or you are thinking about taking medication for, that's okay too. Anti-anxiety meds, it's not that anxiety is the problem. It's that fear has been stopping you from making the decisions you need to make. So with anti-anxiety meds, what that does is it reduces the feeling of fear in your body. That's what it does. It has a counter effect to what your mind is actually doing. Your mind is filling you up with that adrenaline and getting you to feel a certain way. Well, the anti-anxiety meds just kind of counteract that, allow you to feel more numb. The critical thing, though, is if you're on any sort of anti-anxiety medication, the critical thing is that you must still work through what is causing the stress. It's not about just reducing the anxiety, because what I see too many times is that somebody will take an anti-anxiety med. It will reduce their anxiety, and because they feel numb, they continue to stay in the bad situation. You need both. You still need the counseling so you can work through the root cause, so then you can remove the medication and get back to feeling and navigating life again. So you need both. So just make sure if you're on medication, or if you are thinking about going on, or even if you know somebody in your life that is taking it, make sure you or they are working on the core problem underneath it. But again, you're in charge of this. And ask for help. It's okay. Talk about it. Be open with it. There's an amazing thing that happens when we are open to sharing what we are going through, and we're have the ability to openly talk about it. It can be very cathartic. It could be very nurturing and healing, just getting it out of yourself, talking to somebody that can relate. And then when you take action, oh, it's the best feeling in the world. That's the part of the healing process, is actually taking action and doing what you want to do. So this relates to being an artist. So many people want to be a musician, maybe a singer, a dancer, an actor. They want to do something like that, but they're afraid to take that first step. There's that anxiety that comes in. What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't do this? What if all of those things? And what you need to do is take action and do it anyway. Because if you want to, for example, we have students that will say, I've wanted to take your class for years and I'm just now taking it now. It's like, well, why didn't you take it before? Well, it's because, and they have all these excuses. What happened is it's because they got anxious about it, thought that no, maybe I can't do this, or I'm not right for acting, or whatever that is, and then they told themselves not to. But then they created stress, and it still hovered around them because 3 years, 5 years later, they still end up taking the class. So in those situations, right, again, when you feel this desire hovering around you, choose it, do it, because not doing it hasn't solved it. It's still there. So choose it. And once you take the action to do what you want to do, you immediately feel better. You immediately feel confident. And you're supporting the belief that you are enough, which is what I would love for you to feel. I want you to feel so confident in yourself that you are enough for this world. You are enough for this art. You are enough for humanity. You are enough for anything, but you are enough. So we have a couple questions I want to get to before, before we get to the end. And I just want to jump in because that will help let us get to the next thing. Okay, so what are some things I can do to deal with anxiety? Okay, so we talked about what anxiety is, the feeling of fear, and we talked about what stress is and how all of that works. But now, how do we deal with anxiety? Okay, so the first thing to do is breathe. Now, I know this seems like, well, of course I'm going to breathe, but what I'm talking about is the quality of breathing. We have to really focus on this. And what I mean by the quality of breathing, many times when we feel anxious, we shallow breathe. And shallow breathe, so when we breathe, our lungs are pear-shaped. They start narrow on the top and they get bigger on the bottom. And so what we need to do is deep breathe. And so, because when we shallow breathe, like we typically breathe through the nose and we just right here in our upper chest, and that's it. So we're not really moving oxygen in our body, which our body vitally needs. We're only bringing in oxygen into our upper chest and then back out again. And that causes hyperventilation, and it actually creates more anxiety because now our body is going into, hey, we're not getting enough oxygen. So what you need to do is take a deep cleansing breath. There's two ways to do this. If it's through your nose, I want you to breathe in at least 4 seconds. So hold it for a few seconds and then out. Okay, so at least 4 seconds in if it's through the nose. Or breathe a deep breath in through the mouth. Now, through the mouth, you're going to take in much more air more quickly and through your body. Now, be careful if you breathe through the mouth. Like you should sit down, or because it's a lot of oxygen moving through you, you can become lightheaded. But it will bring a lot of oxygen in. When you oxygenate your body, will immediately reduce the amount of anxiety immediately. So, and you take a couple of deep cleansing breaths around you. So that's the first thing. Breathe. And we tell our actors, like, breathe before you perform, breathe before you go into an audition, breathe before you just breathe. Anytime you're feeling anxious, maybe before a class, breathe, but bring that oxygen into your body now because your body needs it. It's the fuel of everything we do in life is your oxygen. And then secondly, if you're dealing with a high level of anxiety, like for example, a panic attack or some sort of anxiety attack, well, when you're going through those, what's happening is, so a panic attack is a rush of anxiety in your body that's not necessarily associated consciously to anything around you, meaning there's no thought associated with the feeling. It's very common in post-traumatic stress, where something has happened in the past and we're having the anxious moment now. So you're having an anxious moment. It is associated, even though you may not realize what it's associated to because it's subconscious. but you have the feeling of fear, and it's overwhelming because you're having this heightened sensory experience right now. You don't know what it's from, and just drives you kind of crazy, and we become scared of the fact that we're having the fear. We're fearful of the fear, and it's this very circular thing. So the biggest thing is we need to ground ourselves into this moment, because the mind is trying to grasp onto what am I fearful of around me. And if it's something that's post trauma, it's not happening now. So with panic attacks, we want to ground our senses into this moment, because right now the sensory experience is about something else. So what you can do is use your senses very specifically. And there's something called 5 for 5, which I love. It's grounding your five senses for 5 seconds, over and over and over. Meaning, so I'll tell people, like, lay on the ground, lay on your ground, on your back. Feel the ground supporting you first of all, and take your hands and just like rub the ground, like feel the ground, whatever it is, whether it's concrete, whether it's a wood floor, whether it's carpet, whatever it is, but feel the ground. That's a touch sensory experience, and put all of your focus on that sense for 5 seconds. Then look up for sight. Really focus on what if you're outside and you're looking at the sky, then what are you seeing in the sky? If you're inside, what are you seeing on the ceiling? But look up and really specifically put all of your focus on your sight. 5 seconds. Then put all of your focus on your hearing. What do you hear right now in the world around you? So a single sense at a time, 5 seconds each, but it's all about your focus. We're taking our mental focus and bringing it to this moment now as we're going through the different senses. If you can have like a piece of candy or gum or something you put in your mouth, what do you taste? What do you smell in the air around you? And you just keep doing that. You cycle through them. And it's really about just bringing this sensory experience to the present moment. And then along with that, you can tell yourself a phrase, which is right now, right here, I'm okay. Right now, right here, I'm okay. And again, this is for panic attacks when you're not in any immediate physical danger. Right now, right here, I'm okay. And you say that to yourself as you're going around the wheel. And it's a way to calm down those very anxious panic attack type moments. And you do that while you're continuing to take slower, deep breaths. All of that will help bring this down. Now, if you're prone to panic attacks, please talk to somebody. Talk to a professional, talk to a therapist, and they can help you work through the why. They can go back to those moments or whatever's creating this, that post trauma, that they can help you work through that very specifically and allow you to overcome that, or to work, to work beyond that. So I would, please, please, please do that. But this is a trick that you can do. Now, sensory wise, taste can be a big one. Something that you can do is let's have something like a lemon and bite into the lemon. Now, this creates such a shock to your taste system. Put all your focus and bite into the lemon, it's going to be very sour. But when you do that, it's such a shock to your system that all of your focus immediately gets pulled in right into your taste. And you have about 30 to 45 seconds or so where you're kind of snapped out of the anxious moment. And before the anxiety comes back in, continue to breathe. Right now, right here, I'm okay. And you can feel when that anxious moment begins to come back, but you can try to maybe consciously keep yourself right now, right here. So that's another very simple trick. Bite into a lemon. You could try these things and see what works for you, but the biggest thing is you're grounding your senses, you're grounding your focus to this moment. Fear is all about what's going to happen next. So we need to pull that focus into this exact moment, remind ourselves right now, right here, I'm okay. So, next question. How can I deal with anxiety when I'm on a set or for an audition? Well, with these things, breathing is usually the number one thing to do, like deep breaths, getting yourself ready. But the other thing we do when we're actually on set, or even an audition, and we work on this. This is one of the main things we work on as an actor: the ability for outward focus. because anxiety is going to come, and especially when we're paralyzed by anxiety, we're focused inward, meaning we're very aware and conscious of what's happening over here and what we're thinking and feeling, and but so we're self-conscious. So what we need to do is turn that awareness out and put it on the world around us, and this is kind of a willful response. We need to take our focus and bring it right now to this point right here. So in acting, we learn how to put all of our focus on our scene partner, like over there, like who am I with right now? Give them 100% of my focus and work off of what's happening now in them and between us. And so if you've had any training in acting with outward focus, what I tell my actors is when you're feeling that moment of anxiety, remind yourself, put your focus back outward. Now, you can begin to work on this even on your own. In life, if you have things that you do, normal chores that you might do day to day, put all of your focus on it. Even peeling an orange, right? Uh, a good friend of mine who's my teaching partner in the studio, Rob Moss, he uses this example all the time. And he says that it's one of the best things. If you're eating an orange, have a full sensory experience as you're eating the orange. Like when you're peeling it, really feel it, right? Smell it. When you eat the piece of an orange, have the full taste experience. And it can help you learn how to put your focus outward while you're doing a task. Well, this is the same basic skill we use when we're on set or going in for an audition, learning how to put all of our focus outward on what is happening now in the world around us. It helps reduce the anxiety coupled with the breathing, and it also really helps us in our performance as well, because outward focus is one of the essential keys to our performance. But what if I become anxious when I am performing? Okay, now typically actors will have a moment of anxiety, meaning it's we're constantly anxious as actors, but when we're in it, sometimes that anxiety helps us through it. I mean, we're not really consciously aware, but sometimes we become consciously aware of our fear and anxiety during a performance. And usually that happens because we're pulled back into our head. So that will occur. The number one thing that occurs with are the lines we have to say. We forget what we have to say next. We forget a word, we forget a line, and so immediately we're put back into our head thinking about it. And once we're up here, we have the fear about it. And so again, it's take a deep breath and outward focus. We have to remind ourselves mid performance, put your focus back outward. Now, we also, when I work with actors, the preparation for a performance is vital for this. We have to work so hard on a role. We have to work so hard on memorization and the preparation and all of the stuff we put into acting. We work so hard on that, so we're not ever crippled by the fear on stage or on camera. So that when this does happen, because this does happen, becoming anxious during a performance, when this does happen, we simply remind ourselves, oh, outward focus. We can put our focus back outward and we're okay. And then we can continue. So that's a big part of it. As an actor, we have to learn that preparation, the rehearsal process, that all of the work we do leading up to acting, meaning shooting the scene in film or acting on stage. All of that work is essential to reducing these anxious moments while we are performing. And this other question is, this is one I actually received quite a bit. Will anxiety stop me from becoming an actor? No, not at all. In fact, anxiety is essential to becoming an actor. Anytime we step into the unknown moment, we are going to feel anxiety. And as an actor, that's what when I train actors, I'm asking actors to do this each and every time, whether it's a class, whether it's a rehearsal, performance. What I want the actor to do is put themselves into the present moment. Well, when we're in the present moment, meaning we're physically, emotionally here, but also mentally here, when we're not thinking about the past or we're not thinking about the future at all, We are in a place called the unknown moment, the present moment, the unknown. And the unknown is like death to the mind. It doesn't know what's going to happen next, so it immediately feels like you're in danger. So, because of that, it fills you with anxiety. Let alone when we're performing, it's in front of others. So, where it's very self conscious, which again is an anxiety. So, anxiety is something that is essential. If actors lose the anxiety, then they're either too safe, meaning they're working from an idea, they have it all planned out, which destroys the living moment, or they don't care enough about what they're doing, so they're not worried about the quality and everything else. So when we care about something deeply and when we're really putting everything into it, well, we're at risk. Not real risk, but we're at a perceived risk. And because of that, we'll feel anxiety. So instead, what we learn is to use that anxiety, but we learn to work through the perception of it. Instead of it being fight or flight, which is like this thing we call forget everything and run, we learn how to slowly change that perception to feeling excited and ready. Just like when you play a sport or go skydiving or do anything like that, it's this rush of adrenaline. It's the same physiological feeling, meaning fight or flight, the feeling of we have to run because we're afraid, is the same feeling as when we go to a haunted house and we're feeling excited about going into the haunted house. The same physiological feeling, the exact same thing happens in your body. We just perceive it different. So when we're acting on stage, we're going to have the same physiological feeling. I just want to make sure your perception is in, I'm excited to do this. But the anxiety actually helps us as an actor. So it won't stop you. It's actually going to be a benefit. We just have to learn how to use it properly. Okay, so this is this is a very this is an overview of what this is, but I'm hoping, if nothing else, I want you to take away from it that anxiety is not going to hurt you on its own. Stress is really the thing that we need to get under control, and you are in control of your bigger stress items. You just have to take a breath and take that chance and take control of what you want to do. And I hope you do that. And if you do, if you take control over something in your life and you overcome something that was stressful, I hope you reach out and let us know about it. I love to hear stories of what those moments when you're confident, or those moments when you do something you really want to do. I'd love to hear about that. So please feel free to reach out to us about those things, and you can contact us. You can email us at info@truthfulacting.com, or you can even call or text us at the number below, and you will the number, if you email us or if you call us or text us, you'll get Samantha. That goes directly to her, and she will she'll be happy to talk through it with you, or I in some instances it passes through to me and I'll respond back as well. But uh, if you have any other questions about this topic as well, I'm very passionate about this because I feel it's so important for not just artists but in human beings. And I would love nothing more than for all of you to find the best version of your life possible. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed talking with this subject about talking about this subject with you. And we'll be back in a few weeks with a new topic. And you can keep checking our website for what the next topic will be and the date of that session. But until then, I hope you have an amazing week. I hope you do something fun. Doing something fun really quick is very important. It's one of the things that I actually ask my students to do in their normal week. It's kind of like their homework is go do something fun, because when you do that, you're taking control of your life as well. So please make it part of your weekly routine. Do something for you and make it fun. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.